Welcome. Today we will cover the last part of the perfect competition lecture series, in which we will see the whole model basically. We will bring the demand and supply sides of the model together. And as always, we will start with a video, which is basically on the history of the antitrust laws in the United States. Well, this is related to today's lecture in the way that the perfect competition model has certain assumptions or conditions which should be satisfied before you can say that there is a perfect competition, market with perfect competition. As always, I mean, you might have perfect type of case for these conditions, but you might also state that reasonably these conditions are met. And today we will basically also see one of these conditions, which is actually you should have many producers and consumers in the market. And basically, well, in case that number of producers, number of suppliers in the economic system is low, in that case, you have this case is called this trend. I mean, this getting smaller and smaller number of producers in a market is called monopolization trend. The extreme case is monopoly, where the market is dominated by only one company, one seller. There is also a case of monopsony, where you have a single buyer. But in traditional goods markets, usually you have monopoly cases. Monopsony exists sometimes for the input markets. For example, there can be a single company that buys all the farm products for example, all cotton to make from that cotton, for example, clothing, I don't know, or process it and sell it to the other factories. And in the this video is for the United States. In the United States, the monopolization trend, and especially certain sectors with a single, very powerful, if not a completely single, very powerful producers which control, for example, 90% of all markets, 90% of everything sold belongs to them. Those type markets with these powerful producers, there were calls for state to regulate those markets, break down those producers. So in the United States from the 19th century on, there were antitrust laws put in place, which was aiming to keep markets competitive. And when one company is dominant in the market, then that company is asked to sell part of its share. I mean, in the market. I mean, part of itself to other its production capacity. If it is, for example, multiple companies, it should sell part of those companies. Or part of this, some of these factories to other people. So part of its capacity should be one way or the other be sold to the other companies. So you have multiple companies in the market. So those laws in starting with 1970s and 80s start to be more softened, and it were read in a more unrestricted, soft way. The example is given in the video. For example, the markets with large companies were only subject to regulation if those large companies are acting against the benefit of the consumer. I mean, if after the number of companies in that market gets smaller, consumers were hurt. Of course, that's a difficult thing to capture, and also, I mean, initially they might not be hurt, and then you might make some innovations and increase the price, and tell actually that price increase is addressing the increasing quality created by the innovation. But actually, I mean, it's not easy to detect whether the price increase and the increasing quality are really parallel to each other. And recently, with especially technology, IT companies, information technology companies, internet companies, and companies related to computer technology, these large corporations that are dominant re-emerged, like Amazon, for example, and calls for regulation of these corporations once again had taken place. And it's an interesting video with which you can use to form an idea on it, negative or positive, on antitrust law. But let's pass this. Let's continue. So perfectly competitive market is a specific type of market which produces optimum outcome in the long run according to mainstream standards. Well, what is mainstream standards? Mainstream standards, we have kind of seen this, but basically market should deliver as much benefit as possible to the agents, basically. And ideally, you might even say, I mean, the mainstream economics is very consumer-centric, so the market should deliver those benefits to the consumer. And again, the mainstream economics is very much time-free, which means you have a stable state, and that stable state you basically measure the efficiency of market looking to the steady state. You don't see whether there is a continuous trend in the market, in regular markets also. Which direction markets are moving is usually not something interested at the core of the microeconomics. It is within the interest of the macroeconomics for generally how markets are moving, and it's within the interests of the macroeconomics, basically the stable state, how markets recreate the stability, and what is their stable condition, and to what extent that stable condition is desirable. Even in macroeconomics, actually, this stability is the key thing. So, as I said, at first, of course, the time frame is capital is variable, technology is fixed. That's the long run. Several conditions are necessary for the outcome. In addition to assumptions made in consumers and producers theory, we will see these conditions, and at the very end, we will see why and how we can show that the outcome of the perfectly competitive market is an optimum outcome. Let's continue. So, first condition: perfect information. Perfect information basically means that all consumers and producers should have perfect information on which consumer is demanding, which producer is selling what quantity at what price. So they should know their preferences. They don't affect their preferences. While forming their preferences, they don't care what other people want and is willing to do, but they know what other people want and are willing to do. But their effect in the market is so small that knowledge doesn't let them act any strategic way. I mean, okay, they want this, so I will change my strategic way of acting is you say, okay, other people are acting like this, so since they do that, then I change my strategy behavior. This is not what they do in the perfect competition market, because they, in the end, everyone else appears from the perspective of single consumer and producer um, as one big institution market. Well, there are some economic studies where this perfect information condition is dropped. The easiest one are actually, even in more advanced microeconomics courses, you can see that that's the risk. You don't have perfect information there, but somehow you know probability of different outcomes, basically. And those probabilities are basically, you know, or you think that they are fixed. That's one way of dropping the perfect competition. But also the trade of information, or the information actors are sending to each other, all of these things, the cost of knowledge, all of these things can be a complex side of microeconomics, and they are studied in a specific field called information economics. Now, second condition is free entry and exit. The new producers should enter to the market in the long run without extra entrance costs, and the exit should also be done without extra exit costs. Long run means, I mean, you use your capital up to its last capacity. Once you do that, the cost of capital basically won't be anymore an issue, because you have already used it up to its final capacity. You will have no exit cost. Also, you won't have any entrance costs besides the basic input costs that exist for all producers. If there is negligible entrance or exit costs, still market might be pretty much thought as a free entry and exit market. And even if there are some costs, if entering to the market for the other producers, or even for workers, is easy, and easy means, I mean, we should take into account what kind of a risk is for them to enter to this market, how much initial money they need to enter to this market. Is this initial money high or low? If it is very high, in order to enter, you need to have millions of dollars, for example. In that case, you have kind of a barrier to entering. But if you can enter with small money and start small as a small producer, in that case, I mean, you can say there's a free entry and exit. But if entering for outsiders to the market is difficult, in that case, you can say there are some barriers to enter, even if those barriers are not completely preventing people from entering. Anyway, let's continue. Standardized product. So in perfect competition market, it is assumed that product produced by all producers is the same. We will have a model where this assumption is relaxed, but for this model, we have standardized product. This makes actually this model by itself kind of not so realistic, because, I mean, standardized products, does it exist in any market, we might ask. Again, reasonably, we might ask whether at reasonable boundary this is existing. Anyway, I will continue on this in the next part. See you in the next part.